This video contains spoilers for Living World Seasons 1 and 2, Heart of Thorns, and Secrets of the Obscure.
So, have you ever noticed that Narcisse doesn't have the usual Sylvari accent?
Sit still and this will go faster.
Because I did, and something about that little detail has stuck in the back of my mind for over a year now. Like, why? Why is she an exception to what seems to be a very universal accent shared across every Sylvari we've met up until this point? Is this difference there to make her stand out more as a character? Did the devs just forget she was a Sylvari? Was the voice actor unable to do that accent? Something about it just didn't sit right with me. And outside of one mention on a random forum thread, I haven't seen anybody talking about this. So I decided to dig a little deeper and hopefully find an answer. I began scouring the wiki, replaying story missions, and trying to find as much ambient dialogue as I could to solve this minor mystery.
More violence, I say, less violence.
I walked down a winding path of lore, assumptions, new discoveries, and of course, more questions. In the end, I came up with several theories, which I'll outline in this video. I'm interested to see if you agree with my final conclusion. But before we get there, we need to establish a few things. Like, who the heck is Narcisse anyway, and why are we even talking about her? Narcisse is a character we meet at the beginning of the Secrets of the Obscure story. She's been with the Astral Ward for at least 9 years, and has climbed the ranks to be one of the primary caretakers of the Bastion of the Natural. From our perspective, Narcisse is a side character. We interact with her periodically throughout the Soto story, or during her Garden Chain event in Omnitas. While she might not have a huge presence, I think her existence within the ward and her lack of typical Sylvari accent hints at some deeper lore. And just to establish this up front, throughout this video, when I say that Narcisse doesn't have an accent, just know that I'm using that phrase as shorthand for Narcisse doesn't speak with the same British-coded accent that Sylvari typically speak with. That would be a mouthful to say each time, and this video is long enough as is. As a demonstration, here are some Sylvari talking.
I fear no evil.
It's nice to see you.
I know I could bring her back to the dream.
I warned you that we might be too late, Teokrin.
And here is Narcisse.
Behave. You're supposed to be a leader, Warden. Cryptists are almost gone. Just hold on.
What if it was a mistake?
Now, I know the first thing many of you are thinking is that this is not a lore question at all, and the developers probably made a simple mistake with Narcisse's accent. That there's no deeper messaging, this was plain old human oversight. And to that, I say, maybe. Unless a dev or the studio narrative director can confirm, there's no way I can fully disprove this theory. We know that Soto was somewhat rushed through development, and that the narrative team took off more than they could chew. In ANET's expansion retrospective, game director Joss Davis even said,
"With Soto, our ambition led us to take on a broader scope than was feasible. We introduced a lot of new characters, and the plot was too complex for what can be reasonably handled within an annual expansion. This left some character interactions feeling rushed and story threads unexplored."
Maybe Narcisse's voice acting got caught up in all of this, or maybe they had plans to address it at some point in the story, but it got cut. So far, I've only been talking about Narcisse, but if you travel around the Soto maps, you will find that there are actually several different Sylvari that also don't have the Sylvari accent.
Droves of these menacing, sinister bastards on our side?
It's always struck me as odd that others must have ground beneath their feet. I don't see why being so high up is an issue.
Does make me want to be especially careful with my vials from now on, though.
Regardless, we follow their lead. Question everything. Never accept the reality presented in front of you.
With the development flurry that was Soto, Is it possible that the dev team forgot to voice act some Sylvari characters, needed to push the expansion out the door, and said whatever, we'll roll with it? Sure, it's possible. And I'll even concede that this is likely what happened with some of the side NPCs who have ambient dialogue. But I don't think this was the case for Narcisse. I believe the developers knew Narcisse's character would be a Sylvari from very early on. For one, she's in charge of the garden in the Bastion of the Natural, and shares a deep kinship with the plants there, which reads as a classic Sylvari trait to me.
They never behaved this poorly. What's gotten into you? Stop! Of all my babies, he will need special attention.
In the Wizard's Tower, we can find a journal entry where she confirms that she's a Sylvari, as she expresses guilt over being safe from Mordremoth's call while her people suffered below.
I've always felt an acute sense of guilt over this, knowing that my people writhe below. These feelings are beginning to resurface, as our foe's main tactic of attack is to corrupt the mind.
And she's named after the Narcissus flower. She even says her name out loud when she introduces herself.
I am Narcisse. I specialize in medical magics and herbal remedies.
I think it's odd that given how deeply Sylvari coded everything about her is, no one in the chain of development flagged that she had the incorrect accent. In addition, ANET has never made this mistake before. Across 3 other expansions and 5 living worlds, the team has never missed, at least to my knowledge, giving a main story Sylvari the wrong accent. That's a pretty solid track record over 11 years. Even within Soto, the Astral Ward is made up of all kinds of races. We see Tengu, Skrit, Jotun, dwarves, and more. As far as I can tell, every race has their accurate accents except for some Sylvari. On top of that, if this was a mistake and they realized it after the launch of Soto, wouldn't they have corrected it in later releases of the story? They probably wouldn't go back and revoice existing lines, but they didn't change her accent for the end of Soto or Janthier Wilds.
We need to get data on the water current and how it affects their travel and behavior.
Again, I'm not saying it's not possible that they simply made an error, but I do find it unlikely. For all of these reasons, I posit that the mismatch of accents we hear from Narcisse and some of the other event-starring Sylvari like Head Experimenter Rainwind or Healer Ren were intentional. Besides, even if this was a dev mix-up, I think we can still find a lore reason to canonize it. So with all of that out of the way, let's look into some lore and make a few theories.
Where does the Sylvari accent come from?
In order to find out why Narcisse's accent is different, we need to look into how Sylvari learned to speak. In the real world, and likely for most of Tyria, everyone has an accent based on how they learned to speak growing up. Accents are naturally learned and they often evolve over a person's lifetime or across geography. However, Sylvari are unique because they are already born knowing how to talk, walk, fight, and generally interact with the world. This is because the Pale Tree grows Sylvari as fully formed adults, infused with general knowledge from the Dream of Dreams.
The dream contains my race's memories. We gain awareness here, and then awaken into the world. The dream fills me with knowledge, and is my connection to others.
From this, we can infer that the Sylvari accent must come from the dream. However, that's not the full story. In the personal story, we meet Malik, a Sylvari who comes from a different Pale Tree. He is not connected to the same dream as all of the Sylvari we know, yet he still has the Sylvari accent.
I'll have to trust you. I've no other choice. But I warn you, the Wardens are under my protection, and I will let no harm fall on them.
Additionally, in the Heart of Thorns expansion, we can hear Mordrim enemies and Mordremoth himself speak with that same accent.
I'll pin them down, you take them out. Your blood will nourish my master.
My master will claim you all.
This world shall suffer for your insolence.
At the end of Living World Season 2, we find out that Sylvari are a type of dragon minion from Mordremoth.
We come from the jungle, dragon. We belong to it. We're meant to serve it.
Pale trees and blighting trees, which are where Sylvari and Mordrim emerge respectively, each produce minions that are fully matured, knowledgeable, and driven upon birth. Therefore, I conclude that every source tree has its own independent dream, but they all share a common accent given to them by Mordremoth. This leads me to believe that Narcisse was born with the Sylvari accent and then later in life lost it. Even if she came from a different pale tree like Malik did, she would have still had the accent, because every tree and every dream has that accent.
The Priory.
Before Narcisse joined the Astral Ward, she was a high-ranking Archon of the Priory. We don't know much about Archons other than that they specialize in dangerous magic, and it's the position right below Steward, which is the head of the Priory. From her journal entry, Narcisse writes that she joined the Astral Ward shortly after Mordremoth awoke in 1327. The second cohort of Sylvari emerged from the Pale Tree in 1304. We don't know when Narcisse was born, but if she happened to be a second-born, that's a maximum time frame of around 22 years that Narcisse could have been with the Priory. Like I mentioned earlier, it's natural for people's accents to evolve over time. Perhaps Narcisse's accent changed when she became well-traveled and spent time among different people and races through her work at the Priory. We haven't seen this concept directly explored in Tyria, but it is theoretically possible. However, this wouldn't explain why other Sylvari in the Astral Ward don't have accents. And I claim that it's equally possible her continuous connection with the dream keeps her accent consistent. Especially since we haven't seen any other Sylvari with a different accent, and there are many in the Priory and across Tyria. This leads me into Theory 2.
Disconnected from the dream.
What if Narcisse is so far away from the Pale Tree, or the wards around the Wizard's Tower are so strong that she's effectively disconnected from the Pale Tree and dream? If she no longer has that line of connection, then there's nothing holding her to the Sylvari accent. Perhaps this, in combination with her exposure to a wide variety of people and cultures, has made it easy for her accent to evolve. This could be true, but we know of other Sylvari, like those in the Nightmare Court and Soundless, who have chosen to sever their connection with the Pale Tree and still retain their accent. Let's look at some Sylvari who traveled extensively like Narcisse did and see what happened to them. Aaron is a Soundless Sylvari who chose to cut ties with the Pale Tree and joined the Zephyrhites, a secluded organization made up of humans. While he was only among them for a couple years, he was likely completely immersed within their culture and would rarely see other Sylvari. Initially, I thought Aaron would be like all other story Sylvari. However, when I went to replay the story mission for this video, I noticed that he doesn't have an accent either.
Unhappy times. Unhappy. Somewhere. Yes, you're right. On your life. Though perhaps on your death. I will continue and I will be victorious.
We don't meet many Soundless Sylvari, but there is a village of them in Caledon Forest, and from the ambient dialogue there, everyone seems to retain their accent. With that in mind, it seems plausible that Aaron's accent was changed because of his voluntary disconnection from the dream and human cultural immersion. Another well-traveled Sylvari is Scarlet. While she's not quite a Soundless, she was able to separate her thoughts and memories from the dream. Scarlet spent around 10 years traveling and embedding herself in different cultures, studying among the Norn, Asura, Hylic, and then later working closely with Crate, Flame Legion, Dredge, and Inquest. Yet through all of her travels, her accent remained steady.
Aren't you even curious about why I did it? All this chaos and destruction?
Lastly, I want to mention Fallon, a firstborn who became the Grand Duchess of the Nightmare Court. Fallon was always skeptical of the Pale Tree's teaching and the dream at large. When Cadiern and the rest of the Secondborn emerged, Fallon found other like-minded Sylvari and joined the newly formed Nightmare Court. There, she disconnected herself from the dream and fully embraced Nightmare for over 20 years. Just like the Soundless, most of the Nightmare Court we meet do retain their accent, likely because they stay among their fellow Sylvari and don't often travel outside of Sylvari towns and cities. However, Fallon is an interesting exception. She never had that strong of an accent compared to her fellow Firstborn, and in the last story mission she appears in, her accent is practically non-existent. The difference between her Season 2 and Heart of Thorns performance is quite noticeable in my opinion.
Filling the heads of this new crop with only one side doesn't seem responsible. Oh, please.
I thought you were in jail, little brother. We seek freedom, and Mordremoth's yoke is even more onerous than the Pale Trees.
Across these examples, there's evidence for and against the dream's influence on accent retention. From what I can tell, all Sylvari and Mordrim begin with their accent, and then there are two groups of Sylvari who go on to lose it. Those who voluntarily disconnect from the dream, and those in the Astral Ward. Within these groups, the loss of accent isn't guaranteed, as we see members from both groups keep and lose their accent. Going back to the initial hypothesis of this theory, perhaps these aren't two groups at all. Maybe, as a consequence of joining the Astral Ward, all Sylvari members become disconnected from the dream. Or maybe there's something else at play. This brings me to my final and personal favorite theory.
Seer magic is interfering.
The Wizard's Tower and Omnitas are where the Astral Ward resides. We know they are protected by a great deal of magic to shield the inhabitants and keep their existence secret from the rest of Tyria. Isgarin is the head of the Astral Ward, owner of the Wizard's Tower, and protector over all Ward territory. So it stands to reason the protection magic comes from him, a Seer. If this is the case, then the Astral Ward is constantly exposed to Seer magic. Isgarin mentions in his book, Seer Curses and Rituals, that
it is critical to understand the nature of the wizard's magic in order to successfully navigate your time in this organization. Every day, in some unique way, you will be interacting with these powers.
We also know that Seer magic can have effects on the mind. Every wizard must go through an ascension, which is an old Seer ritual led by Isgarin himself. When wizards ascend, they lose many, if not most, of their personal memories, which become locked away in their subconscious.
In order to connect to the flow and access the magical ecosystem, there's a ritual. It makes your memories fuzzy, the personal ones, at least.
While most of the Astral Ward will never go through that ritual, it is possible that the same type of magic responsible for substantial memory loss also has effects on people's minds over time and with constant exposure. Furthermore, the base game and Heart of Thorns establish that some Sylvari are more susceptible to mind manipulation than others. This is why some Sylvari give in to Nightmare while others don't, and why some were able to fight off Mordremoth's call while others gave in immediately. Narcisse even notes that Sylvari who recovered from turning towards Mordremoth are more susceptible to Cryptis possession, another form of mind control.
We've many Sylvari who turned to the ward following the events in Maguma, looking for justice and guidance, but those who were affected by Mordremoth seem to be all the more vulnerable to Cryptis possession.
I personally think this is what happened to healer Ren, who we fight in Omnitas alongside Lyra after she became Cryptis possessed. She also does not have the Sylvari accent.
This madness! They destroyed everything! We needed you!
Generally, the connection to the Pale Tree and the Dream helps protect Sylvari from mind manipulation. But Narcisse explains in her journal that when Mordremoth awoke, it was the magic of the Wizard's Tower that shielded her and other Ward Sylvari from Mordremoth's call, not the Pale Tree like we heard in Heart of Thorns.
Myself and the very few Sylvari who had already joined the ward after his rising were protected from Mordremoth's call, hiding within the tower in Omnitas's embrace.
This means Seer magic can work alongside the dream, or potentially even take place of the dream in a Sylvari subconscious. This concept, in combination with the constant exposure of magic and the fact that certain Sylvari are more susceptible to mind alteration, explains why some Sylvari in the ward retained their accent and others didn't. With this theory, I conclude that newer ward recruits who haven't had long exposure to the Wizard's Tower, or Sylvari with higher mental defenses, will keep their accent longer. Meanwhile, others who have been in the ward a long time, like Narcisse or head experimenter Rainwind, or those who can be easily molded to a new presence in their mind, will lose it. Looking back at the two groups of Sylvari who can lose their accent, the one constant is the lack of protection from the Pale Tree and Dream, either through voluntary disconnection like the Soundless and Nightmare Court, or through interference or possible override from Seer magic. We don't know if the Sylvari ward members are necessarily cut off from the dream, but it appears to me that the influence of Seer magic is stronger than the influence of the Pale Tree. Those are my theories as to why Narcisse doesn't have an accent like almost every other Sylvari in the game. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild ride of lore and speculation. Do you agree with any of my theories? Was this a simple developer oversight or an indication of deeper lore? I'm excited to hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you liked this video, consider sharing it on Discord. Thanks for watching.